Let's jump right into the Word this morning, can we? They came here and they're so impressed with everybody, and I know they have great discernment because mostly they're impressed with Johnson and Tammy. And I said, yeah, that figures. If you don't like Johnson and Tammy, you're going to hell. That's just all there is to it. If you don't like me and Lyndon, you're just a sissy and can't take truth. But if you don't like Johnson and Tammy, you're going to hell. All right, let's go to Luke chapter number 9. This is fun, man. I know that Johnson, I was able to hear a couple of the sermons, has been taking us, I feel strongly by the directive of the Lord, into an understanding of the mountain of God, into an understanding of the ascension into the higher place that brings a transformation of perspective, the higher place that brings an elevated lifestyle before men. And so I'm going to just piggyback right on top of that, and I don't know where he'll go next week. I know it's tempting this time of year to do some kind of Christmas-type message, but I'm not wired that way. So I'm going to talk to you about ascending the hill of the Lord, and I'm going to talk to you about a subject matter that God gave me years ago that now I've begun to tweak, and God's begun to show me some new things. And we're going to talk about the mountain of mystery this morning, the mountain of mystery. And I'm going to give you a little more understanding of what that word mystery means. But no better place to go than Luke 9, beginning in verse 28. We'll talk some more about the Mount of Transfiguration. Luke chapter 9, verse 28. If you don't have a Bible with you, or you hadn't been saved and you're using the old King James, I put the new King James up there for you. Luke 9:28 says, "Now it came to pass about 8 days after these sayings that he being Jesus, took Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. As he prayed, the appearance of his face was altered, and his robe became white and glistening." Look at verse 29 again. This is so powerful. As he prayed, the appearance of his face was altered, and his robe became white and glistening. One translation, one gospel writer said, whiter than any launderer could have made it. And behold, two men talked with him, who were Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his deeds, which he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem. But Peter and those with him were heavy with sleep, and when they were fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Then it happened as they were parting from him that Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were fearful as they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son, hear him." When the voice had ceased, Jesus was found alone, but they kept quiet and told no one in those days any of the things that they had seen. We'll stop there just for the sake of time. Now, interestingly, in this narrative, we find Peter, James, and John being taken to the Mount of Transfiguration. There they encounter the Jesus they had been walking with, going through the process of we call transformation, being transfigured. The word is metamorpho. It's where we get the word metamorphosis. It's literally a change, a transition, a transformation. But you also have to realize what it would have been like for Peter, James, and John to be raised in Hebraic culture and be standing face to face with Moses and Elijah, the boyhood heroes of any Hebraic son. So here's Moses and here's Elijah that they'd been hearing stories about, one for, 865 years and the other for 450 years. They'd been hearing these stories, Moses and Elijah, and there's Moses, there's Elijah, there's everything we've heard about. Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt. Here's Elijah, who was the great fiery, transforming prophet who would stand against the apostate Jerusalem and declare the word of the Lord that would ultimately see Jezebel thwarted. And so you've got all of these stories rolling around. Here they are at the Transfiguration. And I want to talk a little bit about the characters involved in the Transfiguration. I call Moses and Elijah the witness of the two. I call Peter, James, and John the privilege of the three. And then Jesus is there, we find in the story, the supremacy of the one. So there's the witness of Moses and Elijah. There's the privilege that Peter, James, and John got to experience this transformation. And then there's the supremacy of Jesus. And you'll find later on in the story that Peter, James, and John are wrestling with the supremacy of Jesus because they are now elevating Moses and Elijah to the same place of preeminence Jesus was supposed to hold. They said, let's build 3 tabernacles, one for Moses, one for Elijah, and then one for you too. Oh, we're not going to forget you too. So they're about to build tabernacles for men when they're standing in the presence of God. And this becomes a picture of what we always do in the church when we start elevating personalities and gifts. So Moses and Elijah are there, but neither one of them stand in supremacy. They are simply there to witness. Moses is there to be the representative of the law, declaring that Jesus is the Messiah. Elijah is there representing the prophets, because the Bible said the law and the prophets prophesied until John. John operated in the spirit of Elijah, so now Elijah is there to declare Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of everything in the prophets. Moses is there to declare Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of everything within the law. They're there when they start to get elevated in the eyes of the men. They get removed, and out of the cloud, one voice comes from the Father saying, I've got one son, and his name's not Moses, and his name's not Elijah. His name is Jesus. And I want to talk to you about 7 successive preeminent events that marked Christ's life. Christ's life was marked by 7 successive preeminent events. Number 1, his birth. Number 2, his baptism. Number 3, his temptation. Number 4, his transfiguration. 5th, his crucifixion. 6th, his resurrection. And 7, his ascension. Let me go through those again for the note takers. Number 1, his birth. Number 2, his baptism. Number 3, his temptation. Number 4, his transfiguration. 5, his crucifixion. 6, his resurrection. And 7, his ascension. I don't mean to get too Bible teachery on a Sunday morning, but there's a purpose behind this. This is what I want to show you about the transfiguration. Look at the 3 events that preceded the transfiguration. Birth, baptism, and temptation. Very common things that anybody goes through. Birth, baptism, temptation. Look at the 3 events on the other side of the transfiguration. Crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension. Something about the transfiguration paved the way for the next dimension of Jesus' assignment in the earth. And there's something about transfiguration that paves the way for you and I to operate in the next dimension of our assignment in the earth. I believe Jesus was doing something we can do and experiencing something we can experience. His transfiguration could have taken place at any point in time, but his transfiguration took place at a specific point in time. And it was the place he chose to climb the mountain, and it was the place he chose to pray. And I'm going to talk about the mountain today in light of the idea that the mountain is the place of prayer. It's also, of course, the place of worship. It's a place of communion. But we're going to look at the mountain of God's presence as the place we ascend into the hill of the Lord in the lifestyle of communion with God. Not church attendance. I've never met anybody in all my years of ministry that experienced transfiguration or transformation or metamorpho through church attendance. It's not that cheap. You don't get to come to church. Nobody goes through. I've never seen anybody go through a true metamorpho because a preacher laid hands on them or because they got slain in the spirit. You have to commit to a lifestyle of climbing if you're going to experience the process of changing. That's why so many people have an incredible encounter with God, but they never sustain that encounter and move into fruit that remains. Because although they had a powerful encounter with God, they never understood that that was not the end. That was the initiation into the lifestyle that would ultimately produce the greatest change. So when learning about the secret mountain of God's presence, verse 28 says, Jesus went into the mountain to pray. If Jesus understood in perfection the necessity of transformation produced through prayer, how much more should you and I get the revelation that some things are not going to change in our lives until we get serious about the business of a personal prayer life? Period. You can't worship enough to make up for the fact that you don't pray. You can't read the Bible enough to make up for the fact that you don't pray. You can't listen to enough podcasts to make up for the fact that you don't pray. You can't listen to good enough worship music in your car to make up for the fact that you have not been willing to inconvenience yourself through the lifestyle of private seeking of God. There is no replacement for it. Jesus continually, in the midst of a ministry that would only last 3.5 years, knew that he had to get away and pray. If I had a ministry that I knew only lasts 3.5 years and I had never sinned before in my life, I would not pray. I would be having dead-raising crusades. Think about it. What do you pray about if you're Jesus? I mean, if you took, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have, and I never will again, out of most of our prayer lives, there would be no prayer life. Could you imagine? We've often said, what would it have been like to be there on the Sermon on the Mount and listen to Jesus preach? But take a giant leap forward and imagine what it would have been like to eavesdrop on the prayer life of a man who had never had his lines of communication with Almighty God corroded by the idea of sin. What would it have been like to hear Jesus pray, not out of the volume of his imagination, but out of the significance of his experience? At some point, you and I have to engage the imagon, the Greeks called it the image of God, the imagination, to say, I'm picturing what you look like and I'm praying for you today. But Jesus never had to pray out of the volume of his imagination, but rather out of the significance of his experience. He had seen the face of God. He had stood. He didn't have to imagine what it was like to go boldly before the throne of grace and make his petitions known unto God. It was his throne. He was just returning to the place of his origination. Think about that. That I would love to have had conversations with Jesus because he wasn't wondering what seraphim looked like, and he wasn't wondering what cherubim looked like, and he wasn't wondering what are streets of gold like. He wasn't wondering gates of pearl. What is that about? He knew what it was like, and he was preaching out of the volume of that experience. And I believe that God wants to elevate all of us to a place of experiential connection with God that moves us out of the realm of hope and imagination and into the realm of faith, trust, and assurance. This creates soul winners. This creates givers. This creates servants. This creates true Christians when you've had a transforming experience with God. So we're going to associate mountains with the presence of God. Romans 12:2, one of my favorite verses, says, "Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good, acceptable, perfect will of God." The word conformed is suske matizo, and it means to fashion alike, to conform to a pattern. So, in essence, don't fashion yourself like something and don't conform to the pattern of this world. Be not conformed, but be transformed, which is this word metamorpho, which literally means to change into another form. I've talked oftentimes about the idea that the Greeks called the early church parakelion, where we get the word alien, that they were literally people that they had no point of reference for. That there's this group of people walking on the planet, and they're not like Pharisees, and they're not like Sadducees, and they're not like scribes, and they're not like priests, and they're not even like other people. They've gone through something that has so transformed them that even when I cannot label what I see about them, I cannot ignore what I know about them. They are different. The Bible says when they perceived that Peter and John were ignorant and unlearned men, they said, surely these men have been with Jesus. What if we could begin to hit this culture with such a transformed people that people said, I don't know everything about them and I don't understand everything about them, but I cannot deny the fact that when they walk into the room, they are carrying something different. This is the power that transforms the world. I want to just be real honest with you today. When I turned on the computer and saw what happened in Connecticut, I had two thoughts. First of all, my original thought was, God, why don't you kill people like this? I mean, if this guy's going to go kill 27 people, the military would do the math and say, hey, if we have to take out one to save a whole, we're willing to do that. God, why do you let people like this survive? So, I mean, I'm just being honest. I know y'all are too holy to think that way. This is the kind of stuff I think, God, tell me where he is and I'll go kill him. That was my original thought. Stay with me. I prayed and got over it, but that was my original thought. And then my secondary thought was, if a man can be so full of the devil that he can go into a school and kill 27 people, I wonder if somebody could be so full of God that they could go into a school and save 27 people. Why is the power of those full of the devil so much more powerful than the power of those that are full of God? Nate talked about it this morning. The scripture says the same spirit that raised Christ Jesus from the dead has quickened our mortal bodies. We have gone through a process of physical transformation where we should have the power and the authority to be able to bring the activity of God into the universe. But while the enemy is so proficiently doing his job through those that are in his camp, it seems to me that we are doing a terrible job inside of the camp of God. We're going to church and folding our hands and minding our own business and going Christmas shopping. They're buying weapons and body armor and figuring out a way to get into a school that has a security lockdown. What if we raised kids that were so full of God that they went into school with the mission and the mindset that there are people here that are dying and going to hell, and I'm going to do everything that I can to represent the power of God being there to stop the hand of the enemy. We've got to come into a place of metamorpho. We've got to come into a place of being changed into another form. We cannot conform to the thinking of the world. The world is always vying for the attention of the believer. Always trying to drag you out of the mindset of ascension. Always trying to call your focus back down to normal. The greatest battle in the life of the believer is not between righteousness and wickedness. The greatest battle in the life of the believer is between the extraordinary life and the normal life. The enemy always trying to call you back down to normal and tell you you've committed too many sins to do anything extraordinary, and you're not smart enough to do anything extraordinary, and you don't have the right gifting to do anything extraordinary. And the whole time, the enemy is instilling confidence in his soldiers while we are allowing the spirit of this world to take the God-given authority out of our hands that should be able to birth transformation throughout the earth. Think about this thought. The transfiguration took place as Jesus prayed. Jesus was doing something we can do, and I believe he was experiencing something we can experience. And how quickly, because of our poor theology in the current church culture, we look to that and say, well, yes, Jesus can go through transformation, but we can't. Why do you think he took Peter, James, and John to the Mount of Transfiguration? Because they needed to have the ability to witness something that ultimately was going to happen in their own lives. Transfiguration. Watch this. You can look at Exodus 34:29, and you know what you'll find? There's a man named Moses that climbed a mountain that went through a transfiguration, and the Bible says his face shone. Think about that. History says that when Stephen was stoned, that his face was transfigured and he had the face of an angel. Because when men live in the mountain, when men dare to stand in the face of the conflict, when men and women dare to live the lifestyle of seeking God, something happens to you that makes people want what you have. You don't have to carry a Bible everywhere you go to try to look Christian. You don't have to have on a Jesus t-shirt everywhere you go to try to look Christian. This is so annoying to me. Tanner, my nephew, had on a t-shirt yesterday at the birthday party, and the back of it said, "If I have to tell you I'm a Christian, I apologize." That there should be something happening in and through our lives that make us so notable to bring glory to God. And we're afraid of that. That doesn't sound like humility. What about the scripture that says, "Oh, that men may see our good works and glorify our Father who is in heaven"? We need to be manifesting. We need to be demonstrating the character and the love of God in the earth in such a way that we cannot be ignored anymore. Amen? Now, think about this process of transformation that we see that Moses went through. And then we also see that Stephen went through such a transformation. And interestingly, I find this to be very interesting. The word that's used here in Luke 9 says that Jesus would accomplish his decease. Now, this is funky bad. Jesus would accomplish it. Well, you don't accomplish a decease. But the word decease would have been better translated exidios, which is where we get the word exodus. And literally what they were saying is Jesus was going to accomplish the ultimate exodus. Moses is here to remind you that one man who chose to go to the mountain was able to lead a people out of the bondage and the captivity of Pharaoh and Egypt. And if one man in imperfection chose to go to a mountain and lead an exodus, watch the exodus that this Jesus is about to lead as he goes through this process of transformation. He's going to lead fallen humanity out of a first Adam race into a second Adam race, cause them to be justified through God, reconciled to God, a propitiation made for sin, and ultimately Jesus is going to become the file leader of a group of people that are going to walk on the earth and say, I am not the man I was. Because of what you have done, now I can say that I am not in Egypt anymore. I am not under the bondage of Pharaoh anymore. I am not addicted to pornography anymore. I am not an alcoholic anymore. I am not a drug addict anymore. I'm not violent anymore. I'm not abusive anymore. My language has changed. My thinking has changed. My passion has changed. My desires have changed. Why? Because Jesus did not just go to the cross to get you to heaven. He went through transfiguration to birth a new race so that you and I could image forth the glory of God in the earth. Think about it. People, you walking the earth and people looking at you and hearing you and being around you and saying, I don't understand it, but I have to have whatever you have. You were telling the story of meeting the young man who was suicidal and wanted to hurt people in God. I never tell this story publicly. I think I have maybe on one or two occasions right after it happened. September the 10th, 2001, the day before the great tragedy, Tammy and I were flying back from Kansas City, Missouri. And we were sitting in first class on the back row of first class. Sitting in first class on the front row on the end was a young man of you could tell of an Eastern descent. None of this has happened yet. There's no warnings that any of this had happened. The Holy Spirit speaks to me and he says, I want you to begin to pray against that man sitting there. So I reach over, grab Tammy's hand, and I said, God says pray against this man. And we begin to pray, and she began to agree with me, and we began to pray. And the man began to turn back and look at me, and we would pray. And the man began to turn back and look at me, and we would pray. And the man began to turn back and look at me. And at the end of the plane, you can see the white knuckles of his hand, and he's staring at me, and he's just got fire in his eyes the whole time. And I said, God, I don't know what this is all. I didn't know if the man was going to be waiting for me when I got off the plane. I'm very serious. He was extremely angry. He turned and looked at me, and I recognized that there was an engagement of spirits. Now, I don't know what the plan was for that particular individual, but I know we got home the next morning and saw the tragedy that happened on those flights, and I believe something that was in the heart of that man was stopped that day because somebody was able to simply be a representative of a higher power. Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. The problem is the one that is in the world is getting a lot of assistance from the people that are full of him. The partnership between those that have come under the persuasion of the demonic realm is greater than the partnership of those who claim to have come under the persuasion of Almighty God. And could it be that we have settled for a Christianity that is defined by church attendance and not defined by living in secret communion with our God? Now consider this thought, and I'll move on a little forward in this teaching. I want to show you that Prayer Mountain, as I'm calling it, or Mystery Mountain as we refer to it at home. Mystery Mountain births three transformations. The first transformation that comes out of Mystery Mountain is it transforms our view of life. It transforms our view of life. True prayer is the ascending of the soul to a spiritual summit. As in the natural, high altitude transforms our view of the natural world, i.e. big things become little. So does time in the presence of God transform our view of the spiritual world. Let me read that again. As in the natural, high altitude transforms our view of the natural world. Big things become little and little things become big. So does time in the presence of God transform our view of the spiritual world. If you find a person who has an absence of faith for healing, you find a person who has a lapse in their prayer life. Because the more time you spend in the presence of God, the more you have to become aware of the might that is available to those that live in the presence of God. If you find people that have somehow developed a theology that said that God doesn't deliver anymore, you can always find a person that is living outside of the presence of God, because it's impossible to stay in His presence and sense spiritual limitation. So, ascending the summit transforms our view of life. If you've ever, I remember taking Elijah up for the first time on an airplane, and as we were flying out, it was so cool. We flew over our house. So Tammy's sitting on the aisle, I'm sitting in the window. I pull him up in my lap, and I point down to the house, and he said, "That's a little house. That's not our house. That's a little house." I said, "But it's a little house because we're up here. The house is the same size. We just have a different perspective." And the things that we think are insurmountable are only insurmountable because of our altitude. The things that we look at and we say that's too big and it's enormous and we can never conquer that, we can either continue to look at that from the view of man, or we can get a God's eye view and begin to look down into the things of this earth and say, healing is possible if we can see it from the right altitude. The marriage being put back together is possible if we can see it from the right altitude. Deliverance is possible. A financial way out is possible if we can quit looking at things from a carnal perspective and begin to get into an elevated realm. America turning back to God is impossible from here. But if you get high enough, you can shrink America. If you get high enough, you can shrink North America. If you get high enough, you can shrink the world. If you get high enough, you can shrink the universe. But you have to get high enough. You have to quit looking at things from a down-dragging carnal position. You've got to begin to see things from the view of God. That's why He's always in the New Testament saying, "Come up here." There is not, after the cross, a biblical account of God visiting man. The Old Covenant, there's not an account of man ascending into the presence of God. God always comes down to meet with man, because there's not a blood that is appropriate enough to bring men into the elevated state of relationship with God. So under the Old Covenant, God's always coming down to man. He wants to meet with Moses. He comes down to him. And we even read the Old Testament sometimes and go, man, why doesn't God come talk to us like that in the New Covenant? God's talking to Moses like a man talks to his friend. You know what I'm talking about? Abraham is the friend of God. The children of Israel knew God's acts, but Moses knew His ways. And you're reading about these things, and God's coming down, and He's a burning bush. I've stood in front of bushes, prayed, nothing's happened, nothing's igniting, no combustion whatsoever. You know, but what you find in the Old Testament is God coming and tabernacling with man. What you find in the New Testament is, come up here, John, and I'll show you what must take place after this. That if you're going to get insight into who God is and what He's doing, it's going to be because you ascend, not because He descends. Okay? When Jesus was seated at the right hand of the Father, His blood gave us forever access and the ability to stand in the raw presence of God. So Prayer Mountain transforms our view of life. One of my favorite writers, and I won't tell you his full background, to annoy some of you, but one of my favorite writers is a man by the name of G.H. Knight. Let me read you a quote from one of G.H. Knight's great books. It says, "From the mountaintop of secret prayer, we get a God's eye view of everything. And it's marvelous how that makes many great things look small and small things great. How all mere worldly ambitions look surprisingly poor, and heavenly ambitions the only ones worth having. Many a false estimate is rectified there on the secret mountain of God's presence. Our ambitions, plans, labors, worries, vexations, sorrows, and cares fall into their true proportions." I was watching Josh Hamilton, famous baseball player, played center field for the Texas Rangers. If I'm right, maybe some of you sports fanatics will know this, I think he just got traded to the Anaheim Angels, which is not fair because now Albert Pujols and Josh Hamilton are on the same team. But anyway, for those non-baseball fans, Josh Hamilton has a tremendous story in that he was one of the most highly sought after ever high school phenom baseball players. He began to be talked to by Major League Scouts when he was in the 7th grade. He was the number one, not just first round, but the number one of the first round overall pick out of high school to play pro baseball. He got really, really desperately strung out on drugs, left baseball. At one point in his life, found himself living on the floor of a crack house, desperately addicted to drugs, wasting all of his life and all of his talent. However, he had dated a girl in high school that broke up with him because he wouldn't go to church with her. And when he needed help, all he could think of was one man, that girl's daddy, who one time had told him about Jesus. And he showed up at that man's house. Josh Hamilton's 235 pounds today. He showed up at that man's house 165 pounds, emaciated, addicted to drugs, and said, I have nowhere to turn for help, but I remember you telling me about Jesus. That man led him to Jesus, led him through a process of restoration, got him reconnected to baseball, and eventually he married that man's daughter that wouldn't date him because he wouldn't go to church. He's two-time now MVP of Major League Baseball. Just signed what will end up being the most lucrative financial contract in the history of baseball with the Anaheim Angels. And they were interviewing him today, talking about the devastation of losing in the playoffs last year. And he looks at the interviewer and he says, it was not devastating. The guy said, what do you mean it's not devastating? He said, it doesn't matter. And the man said, how do you think people that are paying you millions of dollars feel about the fact that you're sitting here saying it doesn't matter? He said, have you watched the news? He said, I've got 4 little girls and they're alive and well today, and I'm going to go home and see them. Baseball games don't matter. That is the God's eye view that puts all worldly ambition in its appropriate perspective. What will it gain a man? What will it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? What does it profit you if you ascend into the hill of corporate America and lose your family? What does it profit you if you become successful, if you become everything you think you want to be? And some people have so perverted the idea of God's dream that they think it's God's dream for them to be rich and famous. What does it matter if you never walked the earth and demonstrated there is a difference between the believer and the unbeliever? There's a difference between light and darkness. There's a difference between life and death. There's a difference between those that are blind and those that are able to see. This is where the world gets transformed. Let me read this quote to you one more time. From the mountaintop of secret prayer, we get a God's eye view of everything. And it's marvelous how that makes many great things look small and small things great. How all mere worldly ambitions look surprisingly poor and heavenly ambitions the only ones worth having. Many a false estimate is rectified there. Where? In the secret mountain of the presence of God. If you've got priority issues, you've got prayer issues. I'm going to say that again. If you've got priority issues, you've got prayer issues. If you find yourself being drawn to and attracted to the things of this world, if during this Christmas season you're struggling with materialism, you're struggling with your prayer life. And there's no way for you to fix materialism until you fix communion between you and God. There's no way for you to fix lust until you fix communion between you and God. There's no way for you to fix alcoholism until you fix communion between you and God. There's no way for you to fix your broken marriage. You're not strong enough. You're not smart enough. You're not good enough. But God's already done it if you'll just press into that place where He reveals His will and His plan for your life. We must see things as they appear from the eye of heaven. Number one, the mystery mountain, the mountain of the presence of God, transforms our view of life. Number two, and I believe more importantly, it transforms our view of God. It gets us out of what Pastor calls this navel gazing. It gets us out of this humanism. Why I'm hurt, how long I've been hurt, how to get over my hurt, how I was done wrong, how I was betrayed, how I was mistreated. I'm the way I am because my parents laid me on my back instead of my stomach, you know. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, there's so many. Do you lay the baby on the back or their stomach? I don't know, because it changes about every decade what you're supposed to do with the child, you know. So we've got all of these things where we can find an excuse for our dysfunction. But instead of finding the excuse for dysfunction, find the way out of dysfunction, and that is start climbing. Instead of rolling around for another year and all the pain you've been through, find the elevated position where true transformation comes. Start climbing. Quit rolling and start climbing. That's deep, isn't it? Prayer Mountain transforms our view of God. We may see God in nature or history or Scripture. I'm around woodsmen all the time, hunters, horsemen, whatever it may be, and I get this all the time. The woods is my church. Okay. I go to the woods to commune with God too. But ultimately, if you don't have some place in your life where you're spending consistent time alone with God, you're going to remain in cycles of dysfunction. We have to climb this mountain if we're going to see God appropriately. We may see God in nature, history, or Scripture. And as wonderful as that diverse revelation of God is, it is still necessarily objective or something outside of ourselves. It is only through the scope of His raw presence that we see nature or history or Scripture or life rightly. That's why you have to love that you get to go to the chapel, and the chapel is primarily and consistently committed to one thing, the presence of God. Because if you don't look at life through the scope and lens of the presence of God, you're going to remain in the dysfunction of chasing things that don't satisfy. And I've taught the whole world this really deep concept. New car smell doesn't last. You've heard me say this before. You can buy a new car and people stick their head in the car and they go, that's that new car smell. For some reason, that has no endurance. And new car smells goes away. And if you go to the car wash and get them to spray something in your car called new car smell, it does not smell like new car. And I tell people, get vanilla or pina colada or something in there that you like the way it smells. But don't get new car smell because it can't be emulated. You know what? New wife smell doesn't last either. New girlfriend smell doesn't last. More money smell doesn't last. Bigger house smell doesn't last. Because we're all chasing something that can only be found in the real, raw presence of God. If you don't hear anything else I say today, hear this. If you want to be satisfied in 2013, if you want to have real joy that is unspeakable and full of glory, if you want to live in peace that surpasses all understanding, if you want to live a life exciting to live the life that is desperately committed to staying nose to nose, face to face, eye to eye with Almighty God. Ephesians 1:17 and 18 teaches us about the new birth. Can you put that up there for us, Tyler? Ephesians 1, I'm sorry I didn't give these to you beforehand. That the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, may give to you the spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of Him. I like verse 18. Watch this. The eyes of your understanding being enlightened, that you may know what is the hope of His calling, what are the riches of the glory of His inheritance in the saints. Now, let me make this statement. The new birth begets a new nature. Nate was singing about that so incredibly this morning, about justification, about being reconciled. The new birth begets a new nature. Yet, there is still a need for supernatural illumination. And some of the most incredible things that ever happened to the church at large was happened through the Baptist church. Discipleship that the charismatics didn't care about. They thought if you got slain in the Spirit, you were mature in the things of God. It didn't matter that you didn't understand justification. It didn't matter that you didn't understand the atonement. It didn't matter that you didn't understand the new birth. Regeneration, that's not important. Sanctification from dead works, that's not important. Those are just doctrinal things, and those are for nerds, and that's too academic, and we just need to get slain in the Spirit again. So we birthed a whole lot of people that were hooked only on their feelings, and you cannot sustain emotion, so those people inevitably live on an emotional roller coaster ride. That's the good thing I have to say about the Baptist church. Now comes what's next. The Baptist church taught you that you were saved, and because you were saved, you were saved. And once you were saved, and thank God you were saved. And if you were saved and baptized, then thank God you're saved and you're baptized. You're baptized and you're saved, and you're saved and you're baptized. There's a bunch of stupid saved people walking around that are going to heaven and have no personal depth of communion relationship with Jesus because they think that's for super spiritual, far out, flaky people. But I'm telling you, there's a place you can go in the presence of God where you weep on Monday morning just like you do on Sunday morning. There's a place you can go in the presence of God where He will be as real to you in your car as He would ever be standing at an altar in a church service. Jesus wants relationship with you. He didn't want to just get you out of hell. He's not your insurance policy. He's your obsession. And I'm convinced if He's not your obsession, He may not be your insurance policy. And we've used Jesus to get out of hell. And Jesus is trying to say, my blood did more than get you out of hell. It gave you a free pass up a mountain of inheritance where you get fulfillment that you would never have outside of the raw scope of the presence of God. Transforms our view of God. Even when we are born again, you and I still desperately need the illumination that comes from daily communion inside of this mystery mountain. The spirit of wisdom and revelation, I'm getting ready to close, to see Him right. If not, the universe remains a puzzle, history an enigma, and the Bible a dead letter. I heard a famous talk show host the other day was interviewing someone that was making some statements about the wrong direction the nation was going from the Christian world. And he said, but you do understand that the Bible is an allegory. This is what the talk show host said. And when the man got ready to respond to that, first of all, I don't think he was intelligent enough to know what the word allegory means. Because we have dumbed Christianity down so far that it's unbelievable how ignorant we are of something that we believe has transformed our life. Unbelievable. And that's why we don't share it, because most people don't feel confident in talking about it. If you ask them what happened to them, they said, I came down to a church, I knelt down, I repeated a prayer, and now I go there every week. Not understanding the power of being justified before God, the power of atonement being made for sin. I know these sound like 50-cent words in a penny culture, but there's something to understanding what happened to you when you got saved. You got a recoding of your DNA. The great argument in the homosexual community is we were born gay. And I'm not scientific enough to know if you were born gay, but I'm quite certain you weren't born again gay. So I don't know what you were born with the first time, but when you got born again and He became your father, I am certain that He didn't put homosexual DNA in you. I'm also certain He didn't put alcoholic DNA in you, or drug addict DNA in you, or food addict DNA in you. Whatever it is that you and I are wrestling with, if we had faith to put pressure on the covenant we have with Jesus, we could believe in the power of that transformation. But because we're ignorant, we can't apply faith to something we don't understand. Now, consider this. The spirit of wisdom and revelation to see God right. Listen, it is in the presence of God on Prayer Mountain that the Holy Spirit grants unveiling. And I'm going to make this statement, and this is a heavy statement. It's one I've weighed, and it's one that I've been willing to apologetically assert. Listen to this. Even the new nature cannot see God properly if continually denied the mountain of His presence. You can be saved and on your way to heaven, but if you're not living in the mountain, you are still getting glimpses and spurts and pieces of who God is. And He wants to download the whole thing to you. He wants you to be assured of who He is. He wants to know you so closely and so intimately that when you ride in your car, just as soon as you let your thoughts go toward heaven, the image of who He is invades your life. And I'm afraid most of us are living outside of that reality. Now consider this. Paul said, He that is spiritual discerneth all things. He that is spiritual discerneth all things. God has His own way of disclosing His nature and His actions to the spiritual mind. And for me, God discloses His nature and His actions in the secret mountain of His presence. Very few transforming revelations have ever come to me in church. As a matter of fact, you talk about the frame. You talk about those points in your life that you can trace back and you can look and you can say, from that point forward. Now, I've had 3. None of them happened in church. Any of yours? None of them happened in church. Any of yours? None of them happened in church. Church is not the place where you get transformed. Church is the place you get pushed into, the place where you go get transformed. And if you understand that, you'll start saying thank you for people pushing you instead of getting your feelings hurt. My provocation, if it pushes you into the secret place, is the greatest gift I could ever give you. Don't get mad at me when I'm provoking you to go pray. And don't get mad at me when I'm telling you you don't. And don't get mad at me when I tell you you don't give. Your giving has little to no financial impact on me whatsoever. If I'm telling you to give, it's because I know it has the power to change your financial situation because it changed mine. I gave my way into the blessing I'm living in right now. I believe I gave my way into the inheritance of my wife. People don't believe you can do this. I sowed seed saying, God, this is expensive, but I want the right wife. And you know what I did? I gave in to men that I believed had the right wife. Think about that. Because why? Because our job is not to create an environment where you encounter God. Our job is to create an appetite in you till you want to go to the environment where you encounter God. But people leave churches and this is what they say, I had to leave because I wasn't being fed. How old are you that you need to be fed? I have a 4-year-old at home that can take a straw and stick it in a Capri Sun. I can't do that right now. I'm 38 years old and fairly coordinated, and I cannot get the straw in the Capri Sun. Judah can take the Capri Sun, whip the straw out, stick the straw in the hole, go into the cabinet, get his own food out. Elijah can mix cranberry and Sprite, and he's 7. He's making virgin cocktails at home. And we got 50-year-old people leaving church because they're not being fed. What size bottle and bib do you need that you need to be fed? Our job is not to give you a pacifier at the chapel. Our job is to tell you if you don't like where you are with God, it's because of what you're doing at home, not because of the hour and a half you spend with us a week. If you want more of God, I'll tell you how to get it. Put a Nate Marielke worship CD on. When you get up in the morning, dim the lights and go into the third heaven and see things there that are unlawful to speak of. God wants you, man. He saved you because He wants to have a relationship with you. You not in heaven doesn't make heaven poorer. So God didn't just save you because heaven would feel empty without you. God saved you because He was trying to recover what Adam forfeited in the garden. And that is that a man would get up in the cool of the day and have unbroken communion with Almighty God. Meet Him as the sun comes up with a coffee cup in your hand walking down the driveway, and you'll really learn what life is all about. God wants relationship. God wants communion. But it's not going to happen with you wallowing around in what's going on in your poor, pitiful life. You've got to get your climbing shoes on. You got to come up the mountain Pastor's been teaching us about, and from there you get a real God's eye view of what life is all about. Let me close. Boy, I feel the anointing. Whoo, I got to stop. I picked this up at T3. T3, we're going to do part 2 of this for the men at T3. Transforms what? First, our view of life. Transforms 2, our view of God. Transforms 3, our character. G.H. Knight again. Can I read one more quote? Just say yes because I'm going to anyway. Quote number 2, G.H. Knight. You're fixing to freak out. Pastor, you're going to get slain in the spirit right now. G.H. Knight. I'm going to let you take this home. The very countenance of a man of much prayer will often bear witness to his acquaintedness with the mountain height. It will show a softened spiritual beauty that in his prayerless days it never had. But whether the face bears witness to the mountaintop or not, the whole life and character will. This is sure to be seen in his whole tone, an elevation of feeling showing clearly that he is accustomed to being often very near to God, and thus his high fellowship with God will bring a high life before men. Now what you've been trying to teach us? Go into the world and demonstrate what you found out about God in the mountain. If any Christian finds that his soul is not sufficiently raised above the down-dragging influences of earthly things, and his life not transformed gradually but surely into the beauty of holiness, it is only because he does not often enough climb the hill of secret communion with God, nor linger long enough there to catch its heavenly glow. This is what you were born for, and this is what I was born for. I'm a preacher, and you're a chicken farmer. But this is what we were born for. I'm a preacher and you're a school teacher. This is what we were born. I'm a preacher and you manage the parts house at the Ford dealership. But this is what we were born for. I'm a preacher and you're gifted a carpenter. But this is what we were born for. All of us. All of us. And if there's one thing, and there are many, many things that frustrate me about the Catholic Church. But if there's one thing, except right now I'm a Notre Dame fan for just a little while, so hang in there with me. If there's anything that frustrates me about the Catholic Church, this is what frustrates me about the Catholic Church, is that they created, whether on purpose or on accident, the functional double standard of the church when they introduced us to the concept of monasticism. And in essence, what they said is, yes, there is a high, unbelievable life before God where people live consecrated and they pray and they fast and they seek God. And we're going to let the monks do that, and we're going to live vicariously through their commitment. And then we're going to create a whole nother spectrum of Christianity called normal Christianity or laity. And the word clergy is not in the Bible, and the word laity is not in the Bible. There is not a different standard for me because I'm called to preach. So my job is to provoke you into the gift that I have found. A gift that at times I have abandoned and been unfaithful to. But the striving of my life is not to come up with new messages. The striving of my life is to live in the mountain. And when I live in the mountain, the messages come. When I live in the mountain, I'm the husband I need to be. When I live in the mountain, I'm the father that I need to be. When I live in the mountain, the joy that I'm looking for comes. When I step outside of that mountain, God, by His grace, will shut me off from some of the attributes of a good life until He gets me back in that mountain, because Jesus longs to hang with me. Jesus longs to hang with me. I love church. I go to church more than ye all. I love church. I love what I'm seeing happen in church. We're seeing thousands of people. They tried to add up the thousands of people we saw saved in California this year. Unbelievable. Seeing a church grow from 300 people to 9,000 of people, and I would say at least 90% of that's new conversions. Incredible thing to see. But it's not going to work for any of them because they're going to a church in revival. And it's not going to work for you because you go to a church with great worship. It's not going to work for you because you go to a church with great preaching. It's going to work for you if you let this place push you to change the way you live when you get home and you learn to take up residence in the secret mountain of God's presence. One more time. The very countenance of a man of much prayer will often bear witness to his acquaintedness with the mountain height. It will show a softened spiritual beauty that in his prayerless days it never had. Whether the face bears witness to the mountaintop or not, the whole life and character will. There is sure to be seen in his whole tone an elevation of feeling, showing clearly that he is accustomed to being often very near to God. And thus his high fellowship with God will bring a high life before men. If any Christian, is this you today? Ask yourself, is this you today? If any Christian finds that his soul is not sufficiently raised above the down-dragging influence of earthly things and his life not transformed, there's our word, gradually but surely into the beauty of holiness, it is only because he does not often enough climb the hill of secret communion with God, nor linger long enough there to catch its heavenly glow. I hope you want to leave today and go pray. If you want to do something significant for God this year, set your alarm clock. Get up in the morning. Say like David, early in the morning, my song will rise to you. Set aside a time in your life that is not negotiable and give yourself to a lifestyle of climbing the mountain of God. It will change everything. Lastly, I told you it transforms character. Transforms our view of God. Transforms our view of life. Transforms our view of God. Finally, transforms our character. Something I love to teach. Psychologists teach something called intergrade. Intergrade is a certain process which operates in the minds of those who are often in each other's company, by which they tend to grow like each other. Intergrade. You ever been around the old couple that looks alike? This is rude, and I don't mean for this to be rude, but I have found it to be true. Tammy and I just got back from the most important rodeo that goes on in the world, the National Finals Rodeo in Las Vegas. And there are some women there that look like horses. Huh? That literally are so obsessed with something that psychologically, they're using hair and mane tail shampoo. Come on now. Have you seen these people? Let me just take it a little bit further. Have you seen these women who are obsessed with softball until they start to look like a softball player? It's okay for you to be a woman who plays softball and not look like a woman softball player. Huh? You seen these women who lift weights? See, because your obsession is going to reveal itself. I can tell Lyndon's kids are into baseball right now because Lyndon showed up at the birthday party yesterday with a San Diego Padres hat on, a San Diego Padres coaching jacket. Of course, it's the most expensive one you can buy, and a pair of Mizuno coaching shoes. Unless he missed the ice cream truck the first time it came by, he hasn't run anywhere lately, and so he's got the whole outfit on. Huh? Right? So because what happens is our passions will reveal themselves. Our passions will manifest themselves. Our passions will show up in our everyday life. Whether we do that consciously or whether we don't do that consciously. See, Lyndon, in the outfit, what does that communicate to me? It communicates to me that our God has impacted him to the point that now he's obsessed with his kids. Because he don't like baseball. But his kids do. And so now, because his obsession is his children, because his obsession became his God, and his God birthed into him a heart for his obsession to become his children, now all of a sudden that obsession is manifesting itself in his outward appearance. Have you ever been around somebody that just carries themselves in such a way that you know that they've got something going with God? You ever been around people, we were talking about this last night, and you think, before I go hang out with them, I'm going to pray because I think they may look deep into my eyes and know everything that I've been doing for the last 3 weeks. I want to be that individual that you're scared to go eat dinner with. You know, because you walk with God in such a way. I can remember Bethany being here, and they used to help clean our house when we lived back in Alabama. And I could remember walking in there, and I would walk in there and I would say stuff like, "You people better be praying in tongues if you're in my house, cleaning my house." And they would just get in shit like they didn't know I was kidding. They would just get. You and I could carry something. Ever been that old couple we talked about that walk down the mall and they're holding hands and they don't have to say a lot? They say more through a look than they do through conversation. That they're able to read each other's thoughts, that he answers the question the way that she would answer the question, and she can answer the question for him because she knows exactly what he's going to say. And that didn't happen by accident or because they got lucky and found the right one. It's because they invested time in each other's presence. And when you and I invest time in the presence of God, we start to answer the question the way that God would answer the question. We start to handle the situation the way that God would handle the situation. And we start to look at fallen humanity the way that God looks at fallen humanity. We start to hurt for what hurts God. And we start to burn for what God burns for. And we start to live for righteousness. Would you stand with me this morning? Matt, would you come on up to the keyboard? We're just going to get ready to close this out. I'll be honest with you today, and this is very unusual for me. I'm not going to have an altar call today because I don't believe you can answer this one here. But I'm going to let every one of you that will conduct your own private altar call in the morning. And if this has touched you today and this has ministered to you today, then you go meet with God tomorrow morning. And you say, "God, before I get distracted with Christmas and New Year's and establish a resolution that I'm going to pray in January, I'm going to fix it today. And I'm going to say Monday morning is going to be a place where I meet the presence of God in prayer." This process psychologists call integrate, a certain process which operates in the minds of those who are often in each other's company, by which they tend to grow like each other. There's a reason I call this mystery mountain. The Greeks had a word, mystery. They called it mysterion. And continually in the New Testament, they would refer to the things of God as a mystery. In our culture, when we think of mystery, we think of something that's too difficult to understand or too hard to explain or even unexplainable. But that's not what the Greeks meant when they said mystery. They used the word mysterion. The word mysterion could be best translated hidden from a common gaze. That God literally veils himself in his own holiness and refuses to reveal himself to somebody that approaches him casually. But he's saying, there's some things about me that I want to show you, and you don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to be intellectual, and you don't have to understand the academic side of Christianity, but you do have to want me. And if you want me, and if you desire me, then blessed are they that hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. If you'll come to me, I'll begin to pull the veil of my own holiness back, and I'll begin to show you who I really am. But I hide myself from the common gaze. I hide my true nature from the casual Sunday morning church attender, and I reveal myself to the seekers who climb up the mountain. God is so magnificent that he knows it would be dangerous for you to discover him casually. God is so awesome. God is so awe-inspiring. God is so incredible. And God is so real that He knows that it would be dangerous for you to try to gaze on Him with a common, casual American Christian commitment. So He's saying, if anybody wants more, I'll show you who I am. If anybody hungers, if anybody thirsts, if anybody desires me. My prayer lately has been, God, this year, if you're going to bless me with hunger. God, if you're going to bless me this year, I'm not asking for more money. I'm not asking for more things. I'm asking for more hunger. I'm saying, God, when I get in that truck, I want to be hungry. When I lay my head on that pillow at night, I want to be hungry. When I rise in the morning, I want to be hungry. I want to be hungry when I read your word. I don't read it because I'm supposed to. I want to read it because I long to. God, give me hunger. God, give me hunger. I believe Pastor has been leading this church on a journey to where we were all born to live, and it is up that mountain. Let's don't call this a series. Let's don't just look at this as a lump group of sermons. Let's say we're finding our purpose in life to live on the mountain. Let me make this statement. Jesus defeated temptation on a mountain. Jesus prayed on a mountain. Jesus was transfigured on a mountain. Jesus died on a mountain. Jesus ascended from a mountain, and Jesus will return on a mountain. What are we doing living down here? Let me say it again. Jesus defeated temptation on a mountain. Jesus prayed on a mountain. Jesus preached from a mountain called the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus was transfigured on a mountain. Jesus died on a mountain. Jesus ascended from a mountain. And Jesus will return on a mountain. What are we doing living down here? I hear the voice of God saying, come up here. Come up here. I got some stuff I want to show you. I got some eyes that flame like fire, that if you ever see them, it'll revolutionize everything about your life. I know you've messed up, and I know you've failed, and I know you've got the devil reminding you of 10 reasons you can't come, but my blood is the one reason you can. Let my blood call you up higher today. Let my blood call you up higher today. Come on, who will answer the invitation of the Almighty today and say, God, I'm done living on that low level. I want my view of life transformed. I want my view of God transformed. I want my character transformed. I want to be everything you've designed and intended for me to be. In Jesus' name.
Just lift your hands to heaven. Who will answer the challenge, the thrill of climbing the mountain of God? God, my heart has been stirred today to climb. And Lord, you're waiting. You're waiting, God, right here, right now, for your sons and your daughters to turn towards you so that you can reveal your incredible heart and the incredible purpose that comes only God as we meet you and know you in the intimate place. Lord, I pray that no one will leave here today so distracted, so blinded, so deaf to the real purpose that you've created us for. God, I pray that you will frustrate every false desire, every false attachment, every passion that's born of something less than you. God, would you just come against it in this place? And on Tuesday or next week or next month, when somebody here wakes up absolutely miserable, will you remind them that they simply haven't climbed high enough? Come, God. Raise up a people, Lord, right here in the backwoods of Saluda, who will be known for nothing other than a group of people who've met you on the mountain, who live on the mountain, who've pitched their tent on the mountain. God, I want to be like Joshua, who stayed out near Moses' tent and would not depart the place of your presence. God, we love you. I thank you, Lord, for the man of God that you sent here, that you've connected us with. And Lord, I don't love Damon because he's a great preacher. Lord, I love this man because he's got a heart for you, and he stirs me to climb. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for that connection in this house. And now may the peace of God that comes in his presence keep you, guard you until you are complete and whole in him. Thank you, Jesus. We bless you. We love you. And everybody said, amen. Amen. Be blessed. We release you.